The first sound Kang Tae-yoon heard when he stepped out of his office was barking. Not a dog. He did not have a dog. He had never had a dog. The Kang household did not have animals because animals introduced variables he had no interest in managing, and Tae-yoon had spent the last 3 years managing enough variables for several lifetimes. He stood in the hallway of his own house and listened. Woof. A pause. Then a second voice, slightly different, from the same direction. That doesn't sound like a dog. I'm warming up. Dogs don't warm up. How do you know what dogs do? I've met dogs. I've met more dogs than you. That is literally impossible. We have been to all the same places. He was walking before he finished deciding to walk, past the framed photographs of infrastructure projects spanning 5 countries, past the assistant's empty desk, down the corridor that led to his daughter's room, which was the only room in this house that still had light coming from under the door at 8 in the morning, which was the only evidence that the room was occupied by someone who had not entirely removed herself from the world. He opened the door. On the floor of his daughter's room were 2 identical black boys, on all fours, looking at each other, looking at him, frozen. He looked at them. He looked past them at his daughter. Savannah was smiling, not the careful half-expression she produced when doctors needed to see that she was cooperating, not the managed pleasantness she offered therapists who asked how she was feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. A real smile, the kind that arrived before you could decide about it, the kind that came from somewhere medicine could not locate or prescribe. His daughter was smiling, and his hands were doing something at his sides that he controlled before it became anything, and he looked back at the 2 boys on the floor of her room. The one on the left said, "We can explain." The one on the right said, "He can explain. I was against this from the beginning. You were barking. I was supporting the execution. Those are completely different things." Tae-yoon stood in the doorway and said nothing. He was a man whose silence had consequence, and everyone who worked for him knew this. These 2 boys did not appear to know this yet, or possibly they knew and had reached a philosophical position about it. "Who are you?" he said. Both of them pointed upward simultaneously in the vague direction of the house's upper floors, which was not an explanation. The one on the right tried, "Our mom works here. Since yesterday," the other one added, as though the timeline was the relevant information. Kang Tae-yoon looked at his daughter. Savannah's smile had shifted into something more complicated, the face of a child who understood that the 2 boys on her floor were probably about to be removed from her floor and was working out how she felt about that. In 3 years, he had watched his daughter's face go through a very limited range of expressions. This one was new. It had something alive in it. He looked at the boys. "Get up," he said. "Find your mother and stay where she is." They got up. They left. They went down the corridor with the careful speed of people who were not running, but were moving at a pace that could be mistaken for walking if observed from a certain angle. Tae-yoon stepped into the room. His daughter's eyes tracked him the way they always tracked him, warily, carefully, the way you watch something that has the power to reorganize your entire day. He sat in the chair near the window. Not near her, near the window. "Who were they?" he said. "Marlo and Micah." She looked at her hands. The new housekeeper's sons. What were they doing? Being dogs. He sat with this. "Why?" She shrugged. It was the first shrug he had seen from her in 3 years. Shrugging required a small investment of energy in the world, a small opinion about it. They said dogs make people happy. Do they? Usually the actual dogs, she said. But she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The but held everything. The specific but of someone who had been offered an unexpected thing and had found, to their own surprise, that it worked. He stayed in the chair by the window for a while. He did not perform presence. He just sat, which was something he had been doing wrong for 3 years, sitting in this room with the performance of being here instead of the actual being here. And she felt the difference, the same way everyone always felt the difference. He left without saying what he had come in to say, which was that the new housekeeper's children were not to be in her room. He went back to his office. He sat at his desk. He looked at the city outside his window, which was vast and indifferent and going about its business. He called Mrs. O. "The woman who started yesterday," he said. "Her children. What is the household policy?" Mrs. O said there was no specific policy about the housekeeper's children, because no previous housekeeper had brought children. He said, "If my daughter asks for them, they can go to her room." Mrs. O said she understood. He hung up. He opened the document he had been reviewing before the barking started. He read the same paragraph 3 times and retained nothing from it. His daughter had smiled. He had not seen that happen in 3 years, and it had happened on the floor of her room because 2 boys decided to become dogs for no reason except that they wanted to see it. He read the paragraph a 4th time. The previous morning, Samara Price had stood at the gate of the Kang property with one bag, one hand on Marlowe's collar, and one eye on Micah, who had already identified 2 things about the gate's hydraulic mechanism that he found interesting and was attempting to examine while appearing to simply stand there. "Don't," she said. "I'm not doing anything. You're thinking about doing something. Thinking is legal. In this family, it's a preliminary step." She had prepared them on the bus. She prepared them the way you prepare children for something important, which meant she said the same things in different orders and waited to see which order produced the expression of genuine understanding rather than the expression of someone waiting for you to finish talking. This job was not optional. Jerome had been gone for 14 months, and the settlement that should have come from the company he died working for had not come, and the work Samara had been doing in the interim had not been enough, and this position, household manager, live-out, the Kang residence in Northern Seoul, a salary that would allow her to breathe for the first time in over a year, was not something she could afford to lose. She told them this in the way you told 11-year-olds things that were important, directly, without softening it past recognition, with enough trust in their intelligence that you did not pretend the situation was simpler than it was. "Mr. Kang is not a regular employer," she said on the bus. "He is the kind of man who built everything he has by being very precise about the things he allows in his life. We are going into his house, his rules, his everything." "What kind of man is he?" Marlowe asked. "The kind you don't give reasons to." "Reasons for what?" "Anything." They absorbed this. Micah looked out the window at Seoul doing its morning things. Marlowe looked at the seat in front of him with the focused attention he brought to problems he was working through. "And his daughter," Micah said. "She's 10. She was in a car accident 3 years ago. She can't walk. Her mother died in the accident." The bus was quiet for a moment. "Like us," Marlowe said. "Not exactly like you," Samara said. "But yes, she lost someone too." She watched them receive this and file it in the place where they filed things that mattered. They did not perform sympathy, which was something she had always appreciated about them. They felt things fully and filed them accurately, without dramatizing either process. The gate opened. The driveway was long. The house at the end of it was the house of a man who had spent 30 years turning control into an aesthetic. Samara straightened her back. "Don't touch anything that isn't yours." "We know," Marlowe said. "Say it back. Don't touch anything that isn't ours." "Micah, don't touch anything that isn't ours," Micah said. "We'll just look. Looking leads to touching in this family. That is a generalization. It is a documented pattern." Mrs. O opened the front door and looked at the 3 of them and made a small adjustment in her expression that Samara recognized as someone revising their expectations and deciding whether the revision was positive or negative. The kitchen first, then the schedule, then the specific instructions that governed every room in the house with the thoroughness of a document written by someone who had decided that ambiguity was a form of failure. Samara read the instructions the way she read everything. Once, completely, without taking notes because her memory for things she read was something her grandmother called a gift and she called a habit. The boys were supposed to wait in the kitchen. This was a reasonable instruction. The kitchen had chairs and a table and food, which covered most of the reasons children moved around. They waited for 6 minutes. She checked later. In the 6th minute, Marlowe decided he needed the bathroom, which was true, and also led him down the wrong corridor, which produced a door, which he opened, and behind the door was Sina Kang in her wheelchair facing the window, with the posture of someone who had decided the window was the most reliable thing in the room. She heard him and turned. He stood in the doorway with the expression of someone who had not expected to find a person. "Bathroom," he said. She pointed. "Down the hall, left." He looked at her. He looked at the wall above her bed, which had photographs. A girl mid-air on a gymnastics beam, completely in control of gravity, 8 years old and entirely certain about where her body was. "Is that you?" She looked at the photograph. "Yes. You were really good." Something moved across her face. Not pain, the country adjacent to pain. "Yes," she said again, in a different voice. Micah appeared. He had been looking for Marlowe, which was the reason Micah was usually found wherever Marlowe had gotten to. He took in the situation with the rapid assessment of a child who had spent 11 years being the analytical one. He looked at Sina. He looked at the wheelchair. He looked at his brother. He said, in the quiet voice they used when attempting subtlety, which was not actually quiet, "Is this the girl who doesn't talk?" "I talk," Sina said. Micah looked at her, then at Marlowe. "She talks." I said she talks. "You implied she might not. An implication is not a statement. We've been over this. You've never acknowledged that distinction. You simply assert it. I assert things that are true. You assert things that are convenient." Sina watched them. They had completely forgotten she was there. They were arguing about the epistemology of implication in her bedroom doorway with the focused intensity of people for whom the principle was everything and the audience was irrelevant. It was the most bizarre thing she had seen in 3 years of various professionals entering and exiting her room with prepared expressions and professional energy. The corner of her mouth moved. Samara's voice from down the hall, carrying the specific frequency of a parent who has eyes in places parents don't actually have eyes. Marlowe. Micah. They went still simultaneously, perfect unison, like a system that had been interrupted. "Bathroom," Marlowe told Sina. "Left?" "Left," she said. They went. She stayed at the window and looked at the door they had gone through, and the corner of her mouth did the thing again. "Before we go any further into this house, into what happens over the next weeks inside it, I need to stop and ask you something. Not about Sina, not about the boys, about you. Where in the world are you watching from right now? What's the time there? Are you watching this at home, on your commute, during something you were supposed to be doing an hour ago? Drop it in the comments. I check them, and these stories show up in places I genuinely didn't expect. And every time I find a comment from somewhere new, it reminds me why we keep making them. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. One tap, it's free. Hit the like button while you're there. Because what these two boys are about to decide to do in the next 20 minutes of this story is going to produce one of the most ridiculous and one of the most touching things this channel has ever put on screen, and you need to be subscribed to see what comes after. The plan was developed that evening in their apartment, which Samara kept clean the way she kept everything clean, efficiently and without sentimentality, because mess had a cost, and she was currently managing every cost very carefully. The boys were at the kitchen table. Samara was across the room doing something with plants, which was a thing she did most evenings, the preparation of things her grandmother had taught her in a kitchen in Savannah, with better light and more space, but the same basic principle, that plants knew things medicine had written down, and plants knew things medicine hadn't discovered yet, and the wisdom was in knowing which was which. Marlowe had a piece of paper. He was drawing something with the focused intensity of an architect who had never studied architecture. "She's sad," he said. "Lots of people are sad," Micah said. He was eating the last of dinner in the way of someone who was listening while appearing not to be listening. "Not like this." Micah looked at his brother. "What does that mean, not like this?" "It means she made it her whole thing, like she closed a door and forgot there were other rooms." Micah thought about this. He had a good mind for metaphors, which meant he tested them carefully before accepting them. She can't walk. She can't walk yet. She has a chair. She can still be in the world. How do you know what she can do? I don't. That's why we need to find out. Marlowe drew something that could have been a plan or could have been a very abstract map. But first, we need to make her laugh. Why? Because laughter is like exercise for wanting to be alive. Micah stared at him. This happened sometimes. Marlowe would produce something that sounded like it had been thought about for a long time and had in fact arrived in the moment, fully formed. You made that up just now. I derived it. From what? Observation. Micah had no immediate counter to the derivation, which meant, by the rules of their internal system, it stood. So how do we make her laugh? Marlowe held up the paper. He had drawn 2 stick figures, both on all fours. Micah stared at the drawing for a long time. No, he said. Hear me out. I don't need to hear it out. I can see the drawing. The drawing doesn't capture the full vision. The full vision involves us being dogs. The full vision involves us being dogs in service of a larger emotional objective. Marlowe, the emotional objective is the important part. We are not dogs. Commitment to the performance overcomes the biological. We are not dogs, Micah said again. And if we get Mama fired, I will tell everyone at school it was your idea. It is my idea. I'll make sure they know that. Then you have nothing to lose by supporting it. Micah looked at his brother. Then he looked at the drawing. Then he looked at his mother across the room, who was managing her plants with the focused attention of someone who was definitely not listening to this conversation. One time, Micah said, that's all I need. If it doesn't work, we never speak of it. Agreed. And if we get fired, you tell Mama it was your idea. She already knows everything is my idea. Say it anyway. It was my idea, Marlowe said. Say the whole thing. If we get fired, it was my idea. Good. Micah folded his arms. The cat is better than the dog. There is no cat. There should be. We're doing the dog. I'm just saying the cat has more range. You don't even have a cat prepared. I've been developing one. Since when? Since I saw the drawing. That was 3 minutes ago. I work fast. Samara, from across the room without turning around. Don't touch anything that isn't yours. We're not touching anything, Marlowe said. You're touching a plan, she said. I can hear it. Plans are intangible. Plans in this family have consequences. This is a good plan. She turned and looked at her sons at the kitchen table, at the piece of paper between them, at the expressions on their faces which were the expressions they had when they had already decided something and were in the process of making it look like they were still deciding. She turned back to her plants. She would find out in the morning. She always found out in the morning. They got into the house early because Samara had a meeting with Mrs. O about the weekly schedule, which meant she was occupied in the housekeeper's office on the ground floor at 8:15, which meant the boys were in the kitchen with instructions to stay there. They stayed for 4 minutes. In the 5th minute, Marlowe said, Now. Why now? Micah said. Because waiting makes plans worse. Preparation makes plans better. We are prepared. You just decided this 2 minutes ago. I decided it last night. 2 minutes ago I confirmed it. That's the same thing. It's a different emotional register. They went to Senna's room. They knocked, which was Micah's contribution to the enterprise. Knocking was not in the original plan, but Micah had added it on the basis that arriving without knocking was the kind of thing that got you removed from a situation before the situation could develop. Sina said, Come in. She was at the window. She looked at them when they came in, then looked back at the window. You're the bathroom boy. That's not my whole identity, Marlowe said. And you're the one who said I talk. Micah, to Marlowe. I told you. I know. I said it would come up. I said it might not. It came up. We are literally standing in the moment it's coming up. That doesn't mean I was wrong that it might not. You were wrong, Micah said. I was imprecisely right. Sina was watching this with the expression of someone observing a phenomenon they did not expect and were not sure what to do with. What do you want? She said, flat. Not rude, just honest, in the way children who have been performing politeness for adults for 3 years sometimes abandon it for accuracy. Marlowe dropped to all fours. Sina looked at him. "Woof," Marlowe said. Silence. Micah, standing by the door, said, "That's not how a dog sounds. I'm warming up. Dogs don't warm up. You don't know what dogs do. I know they don't warm up. You don't know that. It is widely understood. By who? By everyone. Name one person." "Woof," Marlowe said again, louder, with more commitment. Micah looked at Sina. Sina looked at Micah. Something passed between them, the specific exchange of two people watching the same thing from the same angle and having the same response. Micah got on all fours. He barked. It was interpretive. There was no other word. It was the bark of someone who had thought about the concept of barking and was now performing their understanding of it, which was not precisely a bark, but had the structural components of one arranged in an original order. They barked. They performed. Marlowe attempted to fetch something imaginary from across the room and returned with ceremony. Micah raised a solemn paw toward Senna in the manner of a dog who understood the weight of the moment. Marlowe tried to spin in pursuit of a theoretical tale, misjudged his rotational speed, and made brief and decisive contact with the bedside table. Senna laughed. Not the corner of the mouth thing from the day before. A full laugh, surprised out of her completely, involuntary, the laugh of a body responding before the mind could decide whether responding was appropriate. It came from somewhere that hadn't been accessed in a very long time, and the coming of it changed the air in the room. The door opened. They froze. Tayoun stood in the doorway. His eyes went to his daughter first. He looked at her, the way you look at something you have been afraid to hope for. Quickly, checking, making sure it was real. Then he looked at the boys on the floor of her room. The silence had a specific weight. Marlowe, from all fours. "We can explain." Micah, "He can explain. I was against the primary methodology. You were barking. I adapted the methodology in real time. You were barking," Marlowe said again. "I was present." "Those are the same. They are absolutely enough," Tayoun said. Not loudly. He never needed to. He said the one word, and it landed in the room with the mass of everything behind it. Who he was, what he'd built, what it meant when he decided a thing was finished. The boys were quiet. He looked at his daughter. She was still in the residue of the laugh. Not laughing anymore, but not gone either. The face of someone who had just returned from somewhere and was still holding what they'd brought back. "Get up," he said to the boys. "Find your mother. Stay with her." They got up with the focused efficiency of children who understood that this was not a moment for additional commentary. They went to the door. At the door, Marlowe turned back once. Not deliberately, just the instinct of someone checking on a thing they care about. Senna met his eyes. She gave him one small nod. He went. Tayoun stayed in the doorway. Samara was in the housekeeper's office, going through the third week's schedule, when Mrs. O appeared in the doorway, with an expression Samara had already learned to read. Something had happened that required management. She was in Tayoun's office 12 minutes later. He was standing, not at the window, at his desk, standing, which she was beginning to understand was how he occupied space when he had decided something but had not yet said it. He told her. Her children had been found in his daughter's room, on the floor, making animal sounds. Samara's face did several things during this explanation, some of which were professional and some of which were not. The not professional ones she managed. "I apologize," she said. "It won't happen again," she laughed. Samara waited. "My daughter," he looked at his desk. "She has not laughed in 3 years. Your children were on the floor of her room performing, whatever they were performing, and she laughed." The office was quiet for a moment. "They're not supposed to be in her room," Samara said carefully, because she understood the situation required her to say this, even though she understood the situation was more complicated than the thing she was saying. "No." He was quiet. "But if she asks for them, they may go." He went back to what he was doing, which was the signal that the conversation was complete. Samara went back to the schedule. She passed the boys in the hallway. They were attempting to appear as though they had been in the hallway the entire time, which they had not. which she knew, which they knew she knew. "Don't touch anything that isn't yours," she said. "We were just on the floor," she said. "I know." She kept walking. Behind her, Marlo said to Micah, "We didn't get fired." Micah said, "We almost got Mama fired. But we didn't. That's not the same as not almost. In outcomes. Don't say in outcomes. In outcomes, Micah, it kind of..." "Don't," Micah said. Sina asked for them the next morning through Mrs. O, who told Samara, who looked at her sons over breakfast, with the expression she had when something was happening that she had not fully authorized and could not fully object to. "You knocked," she said. "Not a question." "First thing," Micah said. "Before anything else," Marlo said. Before everything." She ate her breakfast. "If she tells you to leave, you leave immediately. If she looks tired, you leave. If she looks like she needs quiet, we leave," they said. "And you don't make her do anything. We're going to make her laugh. That's doing something. We're going to give her the opportunity to laugh," Micah said, with the precision of someone making a legal distinction. "She chooses what she does with the opportunity." Samara looked at her younger son. Sometimes he produced sentences that belonged to someone much older, delivered in his regular 11-year-old voice, and the combination was something she had never fully gotten used to. "Fine," she said. "Go. Let me mention this once and I will never bring it up again in this video. If this story is making you feel something, if you came here for a story and found something else, I have a complete story I want to tell you about. She had 7 babies after a one-night stand. Then, accidentally met their Korean billionaire dad again. Full story, audiobook plus ebook. Pay what you want, starting at $2.99. The link is in the description, or scan the QR code on your screen right now. That's it. Now back to this house, because what these 2 boys are going to do over the next month inside it is something nobody, not the doctors, not the therapists, not Kang Tae-yoon himself, saw coming. "Show me the cat," Savannah said. It was day 3. She had asked them back. They had knocked, and within 3 minutes they were into the argument about whether Micah's cat was a cat or an interpretation of a cat, and she had asked to see it. And Marlo had said she would regret saying that, and Micah had said he would not regret it, and Marlo had said she, not you, I'm talking to Savannah, and Micah had said, the point stands. Micah did the cat. It was extraordinary. Not in the sense of accurate. It was not accurate. It was extraordinary in the sense that it was completely committed and completely wrong in ways that made it somehow more cat than if it had been correct. He sat back on his heels. He narrowed his eyes to almost nothing. He produced a sound from somewhere in his chest that was to a meow what jazz was to a nursery rhyme, structurally related, emotionally divergent. Sina laughed harder than the day before. "That's not a cat," she said. "It's a very specific cat," Micah said, with dignity. "It's not any cat that has ever existed. Cats are diverse. Not that diverse. You haven't met enough cats." "I have met." She stopped. "I actually haven't met that many cats." "Then you lack the data to make this assessment." She looked at him. "That is the most ridiculous argument anyone has ever made in this room." "I've heard worse," Marlo said. He sat on the floor with his back against her bed, the casual ease of someone settling in. He once argued that a broken clock being right twice a day meant it was 60% reliable. "That was about percentages over time," Micah said. "It was about a broken clock. Time is the variable. The clock is broken, Micah. The mechanism is unreliable, but the output, the clock, is broken." Savannah had both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders were doing something that was clearly laughter being suppressed, which was its own kind of sound. "You always fight like this," she said. "This is normal conversation," Micah said. "Normal for us," Marlo said. "To other people it sometimes looks like fighting. To other people it sometimes looks like performance," Micah said. "It's not performance. I know. That's what makes it impressive." Sina looked between them. "Does your mom fight like this?" The boys looked at each other. "No," Micah said. "Mama wins arguments by not having them. She just says something, and it's correct, And then there's nothing to argue about. She's also fast, Marlo said. By the time you realize you should argue, she's already somewhere else. What about your dad? Sina said. The room shifted. Not dramatically. The way temperature shifts in a room when someone opens a window. The same room, same people, different air. He was like Marlo, Micah said. Had a plan for everything. His plans were better, Marlo said, without any defensiveness in it. Just accurate. He'd thought about things longer. He liked to explain things, Micah said. He'd explain how something worked even if you didn't ask, like traffic, or why concrete cracks. He worked in construction, Marlo said to Sina. She knew this. She had not known she knew this until they said it. She had heard Mrs. O say something to someone on the phone once, 3 weeks ago when Samara was being hired, and she had filed it without realizing she was filing it. He died 14 months ago, Micah said. A worksite accident. The three of them sat with this. 11, 10. 3 children with specific absences in their lives, in a room full of gymnastics photographs of a version of Senna that used to exist on a Tuesday morning in Seoul. Does it get easier? She said. Neither of them answered immediately, which was the honest thing. Marlo looked at the ceiling. Micah looked at his hands. It gets like something you carry, Marlo said finally, instead of something that knocks you down. Every day? Most days. He paused. Some days it still knocks you down, but you know you're going to get back up, because you've gotten back up before. Sina looked at the gymnast on the wall, 8 years old, mid-air. I was a gymnast, she said, before. We know, Micah said. You were good, Marlo said. The photographs. I was going to compete nationally. My coach said I could go to China for a training program. Do you miss it? She looked at the photograph. Every single day. The room held this. Can you still do gymnastics? Micah said, in the chair. She looked at him with the specific look of someone encountering a question they had not considered, which was unusual because she had considered most questions about herself. I don't know, she said. Your upper body, he said. It still works. Yes, gymnasts use their upper body. It's not the same. Is it gymnastics, though? Micah, Marlo said. I'm asking. She said it's not the same. I know. I asked if it was gymnastics. Sina looked at Micah for a long moment. He was watching her with the expression he brought to problems he was actually thinking about. Not performing interest. Genuinely thinking. I don't know, she said again. That's a different answer than no, he said. She looked at him. It is, he said. Not pushing. Just accurate. She looked at the photograph. The routine established itself without being formally established, which was how the best routines happened, not decided but arrived at. Morning, Samara arrived at 7:30. The boys came with her because school did not start until 9, and the 40 minutes between arrival and departure were either supervised or they were not, and unsupervised, Marlo and Micah were a variable Samara was not willing to introduce into this house. They sat in the kitchen. They ate whatever Samara put in front of them. They went to school. Afternoon. School ended at 3:30. They came back to the house to wait for Samara to finish at 5. In this window, they went to Sina's room. Every day. Something different. Day 4. They brought a spoon and a cup and performed a cooking show. Marlo was the host, with strong opinions about food preparation. Micah was the expert guest with contradictory opinions. They argued about the correct method of making something neither of them had ever made for 20 minutes. Sina provided commentary. She had a point of view about cooking, it turned out. Her mother had cooked. She had watched. She had opinions she had not expressed to anyone. Day 6. Micah did the chicken. This was Marlo's idea, in the sense that Marlo told Micah to show Sina what he'd been developing, and Micah had said he wasn't ready, and Marlo had said the best time to show something was when you weren't ready because then when it went well, it was genuinely impressive, and Micah had said that logic was backwards, and Sina had said she wanted to see whatever it was, and so. The chicken. It was the best animal. Nobody had predicted this. It was better than the dog. It was better than the cat. It was in a separate category from both. Micah became a chicken in a way that suggested he had been thinking about chickens specifically for some time, or possibly had a chicken somewhere in his ancestry that nobody had discussed. Savannah laughed until she was holding both armrests. After, when the laughter had settled into something lower and warmer, she said, "How do you do that?" "Practice," Micah said. "When do you practice?" "Tuesday evenings, after Mama thinks we're asleep." Marlowe, helpfully. "He practices animals in the dark. I'm developing a repertoire." "He has a list." "The list helps." Savannah looked at Micah with the expression she was developing specifically for him, which was the expression of someone who found a person both completely baffling and genuinely excellent. "You're very strange." "Yes," Micah said, "but the chicken works." Day 9 brought a setback. Not for the relationship, for Savannah. She had a therapy session in the morning that did not go the way the previous session had gone, which had been the best session in 3 years according to the therapist. The difference was in her body, something not cooperating, something that had been moving toward a thing and was now not moving. Therapy ended early. She was back in her room, at the window, when the boys arrived after school. They knocked. She said, "Come in." They came in and read the room, both of them, quickly, the reading of children who had learned to read rooms, and understood that today was different. Marlowe started the cooking show. She didn't respond. He adjusted, tried the impersonation of Mrs. O, that usually got at minimum the corner of the mouth thing. Nothing. He sat down on the floor, not performing, just sat. Micah sat beside him. The room was quiet. Through the window, Soul was doing what it always did, vast and continuous, and entirely uninterested in what was happening in this room. After a while, she said, "I tried to lift my left arm above my head this morning. They waited. I couldn't get it past my shoulder. Last week I could." "Is that normal?" Marlowe said. "The doctors say it's not linear. Forward and back." "That sounds terrible." "Yes." "How long does the back part usually last?" "I don't know. Sometimes days, sometimes longer." She kept looking at the window. "I hate the back parts." "Yeah," Marlowe said. "That makes sense." The simplicity of this landed differently than sympathy would have. She looked at him. He was just agreeing that it made sense to hate the back parts without making it into an opportunity for inspiration or professional encouragement or the performance of hope that adults kept aiming at her. "Do the chicken," she said to Micah. He looked at her. "You sure?" "Yes. I want you to be sure because the chicken is—" "Do it, Micah." He did it. She almost laughed. The almost was its own thing. It was enough for a Tuesday. Savannah started noticing things. She was a person who noticed things, not as a profession, but as a nature, something her grandmother had called paying the right kind of attention, which meant attending to what was actually there rather than what you expected to be there. What was actually there? Senna's color was different. Not dramatically, the specific difference between someone who was present in a room and someone who was occupying it. The way she held herself in the wheelchair had changed slightly, from the inward containment of the first weeks to something with a little more forward in it. When Samara brought her meals, she asked questions now, about the food, about Savannah, about what the plants were for. 3 weeks in, Samara brought the evening tea. It was not a formal decision. She had been preparing something for herself, a preparation her grandmother called by a name that nobody else used. 4 ingredients, the last one important enough that her grandmother had made her repeat it 3 times until she said it right. She made extra. She brought a cup to Savannah without announcement, set it on the bedside table, and went back to her work. The next morning the cup was empty. The morning after that, Savannah said, "That tea made me sleep differently." Samara changed the sheets and said, "My grandmother made it." Good sleep was important to her. What's in it? Plants. Which plants? Samara looked at the 10-year-old in the wheelchair, asking about plant preparation with the directness of someone who actually wanted to know. She listed them. Savannah listened. She asked 2 follow-up questions that were better than the questions most adults asked. "Can I watch you make it sometime?" Savannah said. Samara said, "Yes." That evening she taught Sena the breathing practice. Not because she'd planned to, because Sena was holding tension in her rib cage that her grandmother had shown her how to release, and the release was simple and took 2 minutes and was not medicine, it was knowledge, and knowledge was not the same as medicine, although people had spent a long time trying to convince themselves it was less. Sena did the breathing. On the 3rd cycle, her shoulders dropped half an inch. She looked at Samara with the specific expression of someone whose body had just done something they didn't tell it to do. "What was that?" she said. "Your body remembering what it knows," Samara said. "It doesn't forget. It just sometimes needs reminding." The YouTube channel was Marlowe's idea in the sense that he said it out loud first. Micah disputed this on the basis that he had been about to say it, which Marlowe disputed on the basis that being about to say something and saying something were different things, which Micah disputed on the basis that intention preceded execution, which Marlowe said was a philosophy, not an argument. Samara was at the kitchen table on a Wednesday evening when this argument arrived at its destination. "We want to start a YouTube channel," Marlowe said. She looked at him, then at Micah, then at the plants she was preparing. "About what?" "Forgotten knowledge," Micah said. "Things you know that other people don't anymore. Things Grandma taught you, things that got passed down." "People don't pass things down like they used to," Marlowe said. "They just Google. Googling is for things that have been written down," Micah said. "Your stuff hasn't been written down." Samara prepared her plants. "There are channels like that already." "Not like you," Marlowe said. "Grandma's knowledge isn't on any channel," Micah said. "We checked." "When did you check?" "Last Tuesday. During school. During the study period," Micah said carefully. "We have independent research time. That's not what that period is for. We were researching independently." She looked at her sons. She looked at the notebook on the shelf, the one with her grandmother's handwriting in it, things her grandmother had said that Samara wrote down because she'd been told to, because her grandmother had said, "One day you'll want to remember exactly how she said it." She had written them down, and her grandmother had been right, and she was glad she'd listened. "Old doesn't mean useless," Micah said. He was quoting her. He knew it, she knew it. New doesn't automatically mean better. Wisdom, Marlowe said, is knowing what deserves to be remembered. She set down what she was holding. She looked at her sons on the other side of the table. 11 years old. Jerome's eyes in both of them. His way of being direct about things he believed. The way he would sit across a table from her and say something true, and wait for it to land. "Who would be the host?" she said. "Me," Micah said. "Me," Marlowe said. "I'm more organized," Micah said. "I'm more charismatic," Marlowe said. "Those are different things. For a host, they're the relevant things." "Mama," Micah said. "Who should host?" "Neither of you," she said. "I'll host." A pause. "You could host," Marlowe said to Micah, with the strategic energy of someone redirecting. "And you could film," Micah said. "I'm not going to be the cameraman. Someone has to be the cameraman. We'll share the role. You'll drop the phone." "I have never." "The incident in the kitchen last February, that was an unrelated." "You dropped the phone, Marlowe, into something soft. Into the soup. The phone still works." The soup did not. Samara picked up her plant preparation. "Don't touch anything that isn't yours." "The channel would be ours," Marlowe said. "The knowledge is mine," she said. "The channel is a vehicle. We'd drive the vehicle. You'd drive it into a ditch. We'd drive it creatively." She almost smiled. She turned away before it was visible. Her grandmother would have laughed out loud. Her grandmother had always laughed at things that were both true and ridiculous simultaneously. "One video," she said. "We see how it goes." The first video took 45 minutes to produce and was 3 minutes and 12 seconds long. Micah introduced it with the formal register of a United Nations delegate. Samara demonstrated the breathing practice, the one she'd shown Sena, the one her grandmother had called by its old name. 4 counts in, hold, 6 out, hands on the rib cage where the breath had to go. She explained it the way her grandmother explained things, not as a recipe, but as a story. Where it came from, why the hold mattered. What you were asking your body to do when you did it right versus when you were just going through the motions. Marlowe filmed. He dropped the phone once. Micah did not say anything about this until the filming was complete, at which point he said it 17 times in various registers. They posted it. 47 views by morning, 31 of which were Marlowe checking. The 31st time he checked, Sena's name was in the comments. She had written, "This helped me. Thank you." He read it 3 times. Then he read it to Micah. Micah was quiet for a moment. "Show Mama. She'll see it. Show her." He showed her. Samara read it. She set the phone down. She went to the window and stood there for a moment in the way she stood when something had arrived that required a moment. "She's watching the channel," Marlowe said. "Yes," she commented. "Yes, Mama." She turned. 31 of those 47 views were me, he said, "in case you were calculating." She looked at him, then at Micah. Then she did something she hadn't done in front of them in 47 of those views worth of time. She laughed. Really laughed. The laugh that came from a place Jerome used to reach in about 30 seconds of being in the room. "Go to school," she said. "Both of you." They went. At the door, Marlowe said to Micah. She laughed. "Yes," Micah said. "That's 47 views worth it. 31 of them were you. 16 real views and a laugh," Marlowe said. "That's a good channel." Taeyoon found the file on a Tuesday. He had asked for it. Background documentation on new household staff, a standard practice that he had let slip because things had been moving quickly, and because Mrs. O had managed the hiring efficiently, and because he had not been paying attention to the administrative layer of his own house in the way he paid attention to the administrative layer of his companies, which was a failure of the same systematic rigor he claimed to practice everywhere else. The file told him that Samara Price had come to Seoul 3 years ago with her husband, Jerome Price, who had held a contract with Daesung Construction. Daesung Construction was a subsidiary of Kang Infrastructure Holdings, which reported to the Kang Group Board, which was his board. Jerome Price had died 14 months ago in a worksite accident. Equipment failure, the report said. Compensation claim filed by Samara Price. Status, pending. Pending for 14 months. He read the file twice. He sat at his desk and looked at Seoul through his window, which was something he did when he was deciding something, and he was deciding several things simultaneously. His organization had employed a man who died under his organization's operational responsibility. That man's widow was now managing his household. That man's children were spending their afternoons making his daughter laugh for the first time in 3 years. He had not known any of this until this file. He called his legal director and asked about the Daesung compensation cases. His legal director went quiet in the way of someone recalibrating what kind of conversation they were in. There were, she said carefully, 43 pending compensation cases across the infrastructure division. The processing timeline was standard for cases of this complexity. "What is the standard timeline?" he said. She told him. "And these cases have been pending how long?" She told him. "Pull the Price case to my desk by end of day," he said, "and send me the full list of pending cases." He hung up. He looked at the file. 14 months. A family had been waiting 14 months for something his organization owed them, and in the meantime, that family had entered his house and his daughter had started laughing. He went to find Samara. She was in the kitchen when he came in, not expecting him. Nobody expected him in the kitchen because he did not go to the kitchen. The kitchen was not a room he had occasion to visit. She turned when she heard him, and the expression she produced was the expression of an employee encountering their employer somewhere unusual, which quickly reorganized itself into the expression of a woman who had spent 14 months being professional about very difficult things. "Mr. Kang," she said. He stood on the other side of the kitchen island. "Your husband worked for Daesung Construction." The kitchen was very quiet. "Yes," she said. "He died on one of their sites." "Yes, 14 months ago." "Yes." He looked at her directly. "I didn't know." She held his gaze. "About the accident?" "About any of it. About your husband. About the claim. about the fact that you were here. The kitchen absorbed this. Outside, through the window, the garden was doing what it did in November. Quiet, a little bare, the light low and particular. My boys are here every afternoon, she said carefully. Yes, making your daughter laugh, yes. And you didn't know who we were when that started. No. She was quiet for a moment. This was not the conversation she had anticipated having, and she was navigating it with the precision of someone on ground she hadn't mapped yet. Mr. Kang, whatever you decide about this job, I need you to know I will not stop pursuing what my family is owed. That doesn't change. Your family is owed what your family is owed, he said. That is a separate matter from your employment, which is not in question. She looked at him. The claim should have been settled 14 months ago, he said. What happened? The accident, the processing timeline, the fact that your family waited this long, that is a failure in my organization that I am not going to make smaller than it is. He paused. The settlement will reflect what your family is actually owed. Samara stood on the other side of the kitchen island and looked at Kang Tae-yoon, who was not a man built for easy conversations, who was having this one anyway, and who had just said the thing that she had been navigating around for 14 months with the patience of a woman who had no other option. Her grandmother used to say, "The rarest thing in the world is a person who discovers the harm they caused and doesn't reach for an excuse." He hadn't reached for an excuse. My grandmother, she said, used to say that old doesn't mean useless, that new doesn't automatically mean better. That wisdom is knowing what deserves to be remembered. She looked at him. Your daughter is learning that. She's been using the breathing practice, the evening tea. She asks me questions. I know, he said. I noticed. She talks to you. She started to. More than before. He was quiet. Your children started something. You continued it. I don't have a category for that. You don't need one, Samara said. Some things work without needing to be categorized. He looked at her for a moment. He was not a man comfortable with things that resisted categorization. He was also a man who had watched his daughter start coming back to life over the past month and understood, at a level below where he preferred to operate, that the mechanisms of that return were not things he could have purchased or scheduled or managed into being. Thank you, he said. He left the kitchen. He went to Sena's room that evening. He knocked. She said, "Come in." He came in. He sat in the chair near her window, the chair that had armrest wear on both sides now, the chair that he suspected was where the boys sat every afternoon. He sat in it and looked at his daughter. The boys told me about the channel, he said. Marlowe told you? He gave me a full presentation with what he described as market analysis. Sena's mouth did the thing. Was the analysis good? It was confident. He paused. He showed me your comment. She looked at her hands. The breathing, he said. You're doing it. Every evening. It helps. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask. He received this directly, which it deserved. You're right. I should have asked. He looked at the gymnastics photographs on her wall. He had not looked at them properly in 3 years. He had looked at them without looking at them. The way you look at things you're not ready to see. Your mother took those. The first one. I know. She drove 3 hours to the competition because I was in a meeting that went late. He was quiet. I watched the video afterward. She filmed the whole thing on her phone. Sena looked at him. You were extraordinary, he said. She kept the phone incredibly still. The room held this. I'm going to try again, Sena said. The gymnastics. Something. I talked to the therapist. There are adapted programs. It's not the same as before. But Micah asked if it was still gymnastics, and I said I didn't know, and he said that was different from no. He's right. He usually is, she said. It's a lot. Tae-yoon almost smiled. Yes, your mother was the same way. Sena looked at her father, at his face, which she had been looking at from behind glass for 3 years, the managed distance between them that had been shrinking since the Tuesday the boys barked on her floor. Appa. Yes. I miss her. Yes. Do you? He did not look away. Every day. You don't say it. No, I haven't. He was quiet. I thought, if I didn't say it, the space where she would have been would stay clear, so she could still be in it somehow. He looked at his daughter. That was wrong. Keeping the space empty kept both of us out of it. Sina reached out. She put her hand on the arm of the chair, not reaching for him exactly, leaving her hand where he could reach it if he chose. He covered it with his. They sat by the window with Soul going on outside, and her mother present in the space between them for the first time in 3 years, not as an absence but as everything she had been, loud in a good way, making up words when she didn't know them, filming competitions on an incredibly steady phone, and the sitting with it was not as impossible as he had believed it would be. 6 weeks after the first video, 438 subscribers. Marlo reported this the way he reported all significant numbers, with the energy of someone announcing a historical milestone. The channel had found its audience, which was not a large audience but was the right audience. People who watch the way you watch when something is being given to you that you didn't know you needed. Sina had become the channel's unofficial advisor. She reviewed episodes before they posted and gave specific notes on the opening, on the pacing, on what to cut. The boys received these notes with varying degrees of grace. Micah received them analytically and implemented them. Marlo received them analytically, disputed them analytically, and then implemented them when Micah implemented them because he was not going to let his brother execute something without him. The tea episode needs a better opening, she said on a Tuesday afternoon, the 4 of them in her room. Not 3 anymore, 4. Because Taeyun had started appearing at the door in the evenings and sometimes came in and sat in the window chair and occasionally said something, and the something was usually exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, which the boys had identified as a skill and discussed at length. The opening is strong, Marlo said. The opening assumes people already want to watch. Good openings make people want to watch. How? Start with the thing that will make them stay. Not with what it is, with why it matters. Micah was writing. Say that again. She said it again. He wrote it. That's good, Marlo said, with the tone of someone being honest about something they'd rather dispute. It is, she agreed. You should be on the channel. She looked at him. You know things about why things work, he said. Mama knows the old knowledge. You know how to explain why old knowledge matters. That's a different thing. I'm 10. Micah's 11, and he hosts. Barely, Micah said. He hosts. Marlo looked at Sana. Think about it. She looked at the tablet in her lap, at the channel page, at the 438 subscribers who had found something in her room on Tuesday afternoons without knowing they had. Maybe, she said. That's different from no, Micah said. The walking happened on a Wednesday. The physical therapist had set up the parallel bars. She did this periodically, and Sina had approached them and held them and stood briefly and sat back down, and the sitting back down had been followed by days of not trying again, the pattern repeating with the non-linearity the doctors had been describing for 3 years. This Wednesday was different for no reason the therapist could identify. Sometimes it was like that. The body deciding on a day without consulting the schedule. Sina wheeled to the bars. She looked at them. The therapist said nothing because she had learned exactly when nothing was the right thing to say. She took the bars. She pushed. She stood. The therapist's hands moved to her elbows, ready, not touching. Sana's legs were shaking. Her jaw was set the way her jaw set before a gymnastics routine. The face of someone who had already done the thing in their mind and was waiting for their body to agree. She took a step, then another, then another. The therapist was crying, which was unprofessional and true. Sana reached the end of the bars. She stood there breathing, the breathing Samara had taught her. 4 in, hold, 6 out. And she looked at the window and the light coming through it. Again, she said. She did it again, and 5 more times. Mrs. O called Taeyun. He walked to the therapy room and stood in the doorway and watched his daughter at the parallel bars, slightly sweaty, jaw set, doing the thing his money and his control and his grief had not been able to produce. His daughter looked up and saw him. He was crying. He had not cried in 3 years, and he was not managing it. "I want to show Marlo and Micah," she said. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. "They'll bark. That's the plan." He crossed the room. He crouched beside her chair, the gesture from before everything, both hands, the way he used to hold hers when she was small. She let him. "I'm here," he said. "I should have been here like this before. I know that. You're here now," she said. He held her hands, and she let him, and outside Seoul was enormous, and lit, and completely indifferent to what was happening in this room, which did not matter, because what was happening in this room was not for Seoul. The boys were at school. Samara got Mrs. O's message at 3:15, 14 minutes before the school day ended. She read it once, and set her phone face down on the counter, and stood for a moment. She thought about Jerome. She thought about a man who came to Seoul with plans and a contract, and came home every evening talking about what the site was becoming, concrete and steel, and something real, a thing that would stand somewhere after him. She thought about 14 months of managing without him, about the compensation case she had filed, and waited on, and filed follow-ups to, and waited on again, about the boys who got up every morning and went to school, and came to this house in the afternoons, and barked on the floor of a 10-year-old girl's room because they decided she needed to laugh. Jerome would have barked too. She knew this with the certainty of someone who had known a person completely. He would have gotten on the floor in about 30 seconds. He would have done it better than Marlo, and worse than Micah, and he would have added something neither of them had thought of, and Sina would have laughed harder than she'd laughed at any of it. She pressed both palms flat on the counter. "Thank you," she said, to the kitchen, to the city outside the window, to everything she was still in conversation with that she couldn't see. "Thank you." The boys arrived at 3:40. Samara met them in the hallway. She looked at them, at their school uniforms and their backpacks, and their identical faces that were their father's face and their own faces simultaneously. "Sena stood today," she said. They went completely still. At the parallel bars. She walked. Real steps. Marlo's mouth opened. Nothing came out. This happened approximately never. "We need to go see her," Micah said. His voice was very level, which was what Micah's voice did when something large was happening. It got quieter and more precise, the opposite of what most people's voices did. "She wants to show you herself," Samara said. "So let her show you. Don't make it a thing." "We won't make it a thing," Micah said. "Marlo, I won't make it a thing. You will want to make it a thing. I will refrain." "Good." They knocked on Sena's door. She said, "Come in." They came in and read the room and saw her near the parallel bars that the therapist had left set up, and they understood without being told what was about to happen, and they sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and waited. Sena looked at them. "Don't make it weird." "We won't," Marlo said. "You might," Micah said. "I won't. You have a history. This is a new chapter. A chapter that builds on previous chapters." "Sena," Marlo said, looking at her, ignoring his brother completely. "We're ready." She reached for the bars. She took them. She stood, longer than she'd stood in the morning. Her legs shaking, her jaw set, her eyes on the space in front of her. She took a step. The room was absolutely quiet. Another step. Marlo's mouth was open. He had forgotten to close it. He had prepared a face for this moment, and then forgotten what face he'd prepared, because the moment was larger than the preparation. Micah had both palms flat on his knees, not moving, watching Sina Kang walk across her therapy room in the afternoon light with the expression of a boy watching something he will remember forever and knows he will remember forever while it is happening. 3 steps. 4, 5, 6. She reached the end of the bars. She stood there. Then Marlo barked. Everyone looked at him. He looked at Sena. He looked at Micah. He looked at Sena again. "What?" He said it with the complete sincerity of someone who had made a genuine decision. It worked the first time. Micah barked. Sena laughed, standing, laughing. Hands on the bars and feet on the floor, and the laugh filling the room, all the way to the gymnastics photographs on the wall, the 8-year-old midair, and the 10-year-old standing right now, and the 2 boys on the floor, barking for no reason except that it worked the first time, and some things are worth repeating. Taeyun was at the door. Samara was beside him. Neither of them had planned to be standing next to the other. It had simply happened. The 2 of them at the doorway watching the same thing. He said, quiet enough that only she could hear it. Your husband raised them. She looked at the boys on the floor. Whatever they are, he said, the way they see people, the way they showed up for her, he was part of that. She was quiet for a moment. He would have barked on day 1, she said. He wouldn't have even needed the plan. Taeyun looked at her. Something in his face, not soft, that was not the right word for Kang Taeyun, but open. The expression of a man who had been closed for a very long time, encountering someone he recognized in a way he had not expected. He sounds like someone I would have respected, he said. He was, she said. Inside the room, Savannah was attempting to do the chicken, standing, at the parallel bars. Attempting Micah's chicken impression while standing, which was medically adventurous and partially successful and entirely worth witnessing. Marlo was coaching. Micah was explaining that what she was doing was interpretive rather than accurate, which was valid. Interpretive was valid. That's what you said about your cat, Savannah said. You said interpretive wasn't the same as correct. Context is everything, Micah said. That's very convenient. It's consistent. It's convenient, and you know it. Savannah, yes. You're standing. She looked at him. You're standing and arguing with me about the chicken. She looked down at her feet, at the floor under them, at the bars her hands were on, and the space between her and the wall, and the steps she'd just taken across it. Yes, she said. I am. Good, Micah said. The chicken can wait. Marlo barked. Savannah barked back. Micah looked at both of them, then he barked. Taeyun, at the door, a sound that his assistant had not heard in 3 years, that Mrs. O noted to herself and did not say aloud, that Samara recognized as belonging to a man who was allowed to be in the feeling rather than managing it. He was laughing, not performing laughter, laughing, the real thing, called up from somewhere that had been waiting, arriving without announcement, because sometimes the body remembers what it knows and just needs a little reminding. Samara did not look at him. She kept looking at the room, at the 3 children, 2 standing and 1 recently standing, at the window and the November light, at everything that had happened in this house across 9 weeks and would keep happening in ways she could not yet map. Don't touch anything that isn't yours, she said, into the room, to her boys, to the air. Mama, from the floor. We're helping her with the chicken. The chicken is not yours. The knowledge transfer. That's not a thing. I derived it. From what? Observation. Savannah, standing, laughing. Mrs. Samara, they argue about everything. Yes, Samara said. They do. She did not say the next part out loud. She said it to Jerome, the way she said things to Jerome that required him specifically, which was the way she had been talking to him for 14 months, in the particular ongoing conversation of a person who has lost someone and found that losing them didn't end the conversation. She said, they get it from you. And outside the window, Seoul went on being Seoul, enormous and lit and continuous and entirely unaware that in a room on the north side of the city, a girl was standing and barking and a man was laughing for the first time in 3 years, and 2 boys were on the floor conducting a masterclass in commitment, and a woman from Savannah, Georgia, was watching all of it and adding it to the list of things worth remembering. The list was long. It kept getting longer. That was the whole point.